I would. Good evening, everybody. This is the Mansfield Town Manager's budget proposal. As you know, the Town Council prepares a budget. We always receive an initial budget from the Town Manager, and we have received this on this past Monday. So this is the public's first shot at the Town Manager's proposal to us. We look forward to hearing from the public, whether you attend our next series of council meetings and budget meetings, either as observers or watching us online or submitting questions, however you may want to participate in the process. It's a very open process, culminating in a town meeting in May, but between now and then, the council will be looking at the town manager's report in great detail, and we will be making all kinds of policy decisions. We consider this budget to be the lifeblood of the town, and it contains all of our major policy initiatives and ongoing projects. So it's an important tool for the town, an important tool for us. And this is your first opportunity to hear what we will be discussing over the next month. I must apologize. I will have to leave this section shortly after it begins. I am attending the Ramadan dinner that is being given by the Muslim community at the Mansfield Community Center. There are two other events going on today. There's also a farmers forum at Leonard Hall at 6:30, and yet something else, which I'm blanking at the moment. But in any case, it's a very busy evening, culminating with a concert at Jorgensen. So with no further interruption, I present our town manager, Ryan Aylesworth, and his budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I hop in, I just want to make sure, because a little bit different than normal, not seeing a camera for council chamber. So I just want to make sure, maybe Mr. Coleman or anybody online, just confirm that you're seeing the screen share. Are you seeing the first slide of the presentation on your screen?
I can see this.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. And yeah, so this presentation will largely mirror the presentation that I gave the council introducing my FY26 budget recommendations on Monday. This presentation is a little streamlined. There was some information, some content that was specific for the town council as the primary audience on Monday that is not part of this presentation, but certainly all of the core information, the numbers, et cetera, behind it are the same as what I presented a handful of days ago. As the mayor said, if I can get this to advance, there we go. As the mayor said, there are a series of upcoming budget workshops that are going to be playing out largely during the month of April. There is one next Monday on the last day of March. Oh, do we have a technical issue? Oh. The projector behind me is on, and we do have a member of the public here, so it'd be good for them to have a visual to follow along with. Maybe that's why, well, we'll see. And this screen does take a little while to warm up. And the screens in front of me are dancing right now. Coming on and off, all right. Try this again. Okay. Looks like they can see it in the room now. So as I was saying, most of the budget workshops are taking place during the month of April. The very first one in terms of a breakout of the proposed budget is happening next Monday, March 31st. We're about a week or thereabouts kind of earlier in the schedule this year. And then as the mayor said, it ultimately will culminate with an annual town meeting on Tuesday, May 13th. So just a little bit kind of philosophical background on the budget, and the mayor touched on this as well. An annual town budget is more than just a collection of numbers. It's more than just monetary values. It's a policy document, and it's arguably the town's most important policy document because, generally speaking, what we fund, what we resource, things we invest in, track pretty closely with our priorities. You put your money where your priorities are. Our fiscal year starts July 1st and ends June 30th. So it doesn't follow a calendar year. It's 6 months offset with a traditional calendar year that we're all familiar with. And ultimately, one of the things that we've set out as a priority for us over the last few years, in addition to what I would call the depth and breadth of the information that we provide in our budget document, we've actually also made a lot of headway in terms of accessibility and usability for the public by going with a digital platform. We're using a product called ClearGov, which makes it easier for members of the public to find specific budget information they're looking for, to do, to query the document, if you will. And it's just ultimately a lot more user-friendly. It's like a website, a web-based platform, as opposed to your traditional, hundreds of page document, although it can be exported into a multi-hundred-page document if you're interested in looking at a traditional document. So our budget is a combination of our operating budget and our capital budget. Every year, a core group of fiscal goals and objectives largely stays the same, but there's some evolution here as well. So every year, we want to maintain or enhance the quality of the programs and services that we provide. Mansfield is a relatively small town, but I've heard it said, small town with big services. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of the town. I think one of the reasons why people, certainly people I talk to, have said that they chose to live in Mansfield versus one of our neighboring towns here in Eastern Connecticut is the quality of the services that we provide. And of course, the quality of the school systems that we provide. But maintaining or enhancing the quality of service, so finding ways that we can improve service or expand service delivery in a cost-effective manner. We want to leverage our state aid. We'll talk more about the money we get from the state here in a few moments, but we do get a lot of money from the state because we're home to the University of Connecticut. We want to maintain our pay-as-our-go capital plan, which is a way of saying that we want to maximize the amount of projects and equipment and other things that we purchase using cash to avoid the added expense, interest expense of borrowing. And we want to continue to build upon and sustain our financial health, our overall financial condition, so that bond rating agencies continue to look at us favorably and give us favorable terms when we do need to go out for a bond referendum. We're always looking to achieve efficiencies, find ways to cut costs or avoid costs altogether, and improve the ease in which residents are able to transact business with the town. We're trying to stay on top of our municipal facilities and infrastructure needs, and ultimately we are trying to advance the priorities and goals and objectives of our Plan of Conservation and Development, which we call Mansfield Tomorrow. We want to make sure that our budget is in alignment with and advances those long-range goals and promote local economic growth along the way. So now diving into the budget. Every year I like to start off with an upfront bottom line. And then so that way there's no big reveal at the end. You know exactly where this story is taking you. So overall, the proposed FY26 budget represents a 3.8% increase in the general fund operating budget. And I'll do a breakout of that here in a minute. Our budget proposes several service improvements to expand service delivery and our capacity to deliver those services in certain operating departments. It represents increased non-tax revenue, and I'll get into more detail about what I mean by that as well. And we are projecting a very substantial mill rate reduction. The mill rate, or the tax rate as it's commonly called. We set the mill rate based on the funds we need to raise to fund our government, but also it's a reflection of the underlying valuation of the property we have in town. And anybody who owns property in town is probably very familiar with the fact that we are finishing up a townwide revaluation. And so there's been some pretty large market corrections, especially the real estate, the value of real estate up considerably. And so as the value, the underlying value, people's property assessments has increased, that enables us to reduce the mill rate. So it's not magic, it's just an offset because ultimately we only need to levy enough taxes to fund the municipal programs and services that we provide. And so that's why as assessments go up, mill rates will go down, generally speaking. So here's our budget snapshot. Our budget, the general fund budget, is a combination of 3 different entities. So we have the town of Mansfield, which is what we're going to be focusing on throughout the budget season here, but also this presentation. So the town of Mansfield's FY26 budget, a little over $30 million. Mansfield Public Schools budget, $25.6 million. And then there's the town's contribution to Regional School District 19. Of course, it's a 3-town school district, high school, and it's Mansfield, Willington, and Ashford. And so the town of Mansfield's portion of that is a little over $12 million. All that combines for a general fund operating budget of $68.42 million in FY26. I should note here, we're aware that Region 19, their Board of Ed, their adopted budget, there were some adjustments a couple nights ago when the budget got finalized. And so the figure that's in front of you, this was based on the superintendent's proposed budget. And so the adjustments that were made are going to result in the town of Mansfield's contribution going down a little bit. And so when we provide our next Monday's budget workshop, that information and the projected impacts on the mill rate, updated information will be provided. But I just want to call that out here to let folks know that it is coming. So that bottom line will go down a little bit based on the adjustment in our contribution to Region 19. And then there's our capital budget, and I'll get into what these 2 numbers mean in a second. FY26 budget highlights, so saying a little bit more kind of in summary. So as I said, the budget I'm advancing, that I'm proposing, does call for the creation of some new staff positions to improve and enhance the level of service that we're providing. And those are in a number of key areas. Fire and emergency services, so firefighters and EMTs, planning and development, public works, Mansfield Public Library, human services, and building and housing. And I should note, although again, this will come up here in a second, that with the exception of building and housing, all the other departments I mentioned, we are proposing new positions. In the case of building and housing, it's converting one part-time position to a full-time position, but they're all what we would consider to be service improvements. Year over year, as I alluded to, our grand list following the reval increased substantially. So about 47% increase in the valuation following the reval. Our budget assumes stable state aid, a modest overall increase, about 0.8% overall in terms of actual dollars collected. We anticipate collecting in FY26, but a more substantial increase in terms of budgeted amount, because when we set the budget last year, we had a more conservative projection of state aid. And so the funds that we're budgeting for state aid this year represent a more substantial increase year over year. The reduced mill rate that I already talked about, 34.1%, right around 20 mills per $1,000 in assessed value. The budget will meet all our contractual and non-discretionary obligations, continue our pay-as-you-go capital plan, growing investment in our capital program, and preserves a healthy fund balance in the general fund. So a little bit more on revenue. This pie chart shows where our revenues come from. So again, $68.42 million budget, and that number on the expenditure side is mirrored on the revenue side. So the dollars balance out. And this year's tax levy, we're projecting a tax levy of about $36.4 million, which would comprise about 53% of the overall revenue we would be bringing in. Our state aid, or sometimes referred to as intergovernmental revenue, which is what shows up on this slide now, $27.4 million, and that's 40% of the budget. And that leaves 7% for other. And you can think about things like building permits and license fees and other charges for service that are not collected in taxes and are not state aid. And so I want to show here, this is actually an addition to this presentation that was not included in the council presentation, but thinking on it after the fact, I think it's important to point out that despite the fact that our budget's growing, that 3.8% that I mentioned, and so our overall revenue base is growing by about $2.5 million in this proposed budget, you can see here in the hashed red box that the total amount of taxes that this budget would levy is actually 2.6% less, a little under $1 million less collected in taxes in the proposed budget for FY26 versus the adopted budget for 25. And that's because, as you can see, the projected increased revenues were showing in state aid, as well as other revenues, particular building permit revenue. And then a modest appropriation from fund balance that would be used to enhance our investment in the capital improvement program this year. So this is the last bar chart you see, the column for 26. This is just a bar chart breakdown of the exact same information you saw in the pie chart a moment ago, but this shows a multi-year look back. So you can see, going back a handful of years, how that rough proportionality of taxes versus state aid or intergovernmental revenue and other, how that is sort of broken out year by year. And as you can see, there's maybe a slight trend towards more intergovernmental revenue and less emphasis on taxes collected. So this is our preliminary grand list. The grand list has been certified, but it's not truly final because we're in the appeal period. And so the Board of Assessment Appeals, or the BAA as it's often referred to, we'll be meeting with property owners that have submitted appeals and hearing their cases. And so while certainly not everybody who appeals will have their taxes adjusted, we anticipate there will be a number of adjustments, and so these numbers will change. But this is where things stand now, based on the certified grand list. And again, overall, blended across real estate, personal property, and motor vehicle, about 47.6% increase overall in the grand list. But you can see the largest change is in real estate, with about 56.5% increase from 23 to 24 following the reval. So a little bit more on state aid. Right now, we are anticipating that the payment in lieu of taxes, because UConn is the largest source of that. UConn and other state and federal property and nonprofit property is tax exempt. And so 3.2% increase is what we're projecting in payment in lieu of taxes based on the governor's proposed budget. And other note here is education cost sharing. So we budgeted a much lesser number last year based on basically our historic level of funding in ECS. When the proposed budget adjustments for the second year of the biennial budget came out basically last winter, there was a noteworthy increase in Mansfield's number, and we weren't exactly sure why that was. Certainly, if you want to see a number be different than what you're anticipating, it's always better to see a higher number than a lesser number, but it wasn't really clear exactly what was driving that. We've since come to understand a change in state law that was the underlying reason for that. But when we set the budget last year and we set the mill rate last year, we assumed a more conservative number. And now we know that this number, we can say with a higher degree of confidence that that there wasn't an error made or anything that would be corrected. So we can budget based on what's in the governor's proposed budget this year, which is just under a $2 million increase from FY25's budgeted amount. And so overall, all these different sources of state aid combine to $28.2 million, which is a little over $2 million, or an 8.8% increase above what was budgeted for FY25. And again, it's the budgeted amount that we use to set the tax rate, which is again contributing to a downward pressure on the mill rate this year, in addition to the reval. So just for historic context, I want to show this. This shows the payment in lieu of taxes pilot funds that the town has received. In the last bar there, the green bar shows, based on the governor's proposed budget, what we are anticipating receiving in FY26 and what we've included in our budget assumptions for my proposed budget. So you'll see pretty jarring change in between FY21 and FY22 in this bar chart. And that's because in FY22, the legislature changed the pilot funding formula, and Mansfield benefited substantially from that. We're a tier 1 municipality in terms of how our pilot funding is calculated, and that's based on our per capita valuation. So shifting to expenditures, just got done talking about revenue. So again, same amount, $68.42 million. As you can see in the navy and yellow wedges in this chart, that education, the combination of Mansfield Public Schools and Regional School District 19, collectively make up over 50% of the budget, about 55% of the budget. And then the remainder is the municipal budget. And we've broken that out here by functional area. So you can see within the different categories of municipal operations, whether it's general government, public safety, public works, et cetera, what those relative portions of the expenditure budget are. In terms of factors driving the increase in expenditure, again, roughly $2.5 million year-over-year increase, the single largest source of increase is the contracted salary and benefits. And so that's existing personnel. This is a function of negotiated contracts, so changes in wages and benefits that go through the collective bargaining process, as well as our non-union employees. But this is basically adjustments in salary and benefits for existing personnel. And then separately are the service improvements, the proposed additional personnel or changes in classification of existing personnel in the service improvement category that I talked about earlier, that collectively constitute about $440,000 in increase. Debt service, $100,000. I'll say a little bit more of that in a minute. Energy costs, building maintenance and contracted services, our shared finance and IT services, our transfer to Parks and Recreation, and increased investment in the capital improvement program round out the other areas of increase in the budget. So if we back out the service improvements, let me back up here a couple slides just to remind everybody. Unless that, well, oh, sorry. I take that back. So I mentioned $2.5 million increase overall general fund budget. That's when you include the school districts. The town's portion, though, $1.2 million, which is 5.4% increase year over year. And so with service improvements, so including, if I back up a slide now, that includes this $440,000. And so if we break this out into more detail, this is what is driving that $440,000 in service improvement increases. So my budget proposes 2 additional full-time firefighter EMTs. They're being budgeted for a full year, so if they would be starting July 1. That combined expense is about $233,000, inclusive of salary and fringe benefits, kind of the all-in cost of the firefighters. And then in building and housing, upgrading 1 housing inspector from part-time to full-time. I believe they're currently 70%, so 0.7, so to increase them to to a full-time position. And that's $21,000 there. And that's needed because as the town grows, as there's more rental property to inspect, there's also more demands right now on our building officials that are doing all the field visits, the inspections for whether it's new housing or other development. Those in the office that are certified to do that aren't available to help with housing inspections, so we need more help on the housing inspector side. Within Public Works, the budget proposes creating 1 full-time laborer in the grounds division. It is important to note that this position, though, it's only a portion of the year, basically 1/3 of the year. It's budgeted to start March 1st, so it would not be coming on July 1st like several of these other positions, but would obviously be funded for a full year in all subsequent years. But just for this budget year, basically the salary and benefits for this position, which would be housed in the grounds division, is only being budgeted for 4 months. And would have a focus on trail maintenance because, as we talked about during the council meeting, one of the areas of priority identified in our master plan for Parks and Rec that was recently finished was a need to enhance maintenance, but basically better maintain parks and open space that the town already has. And so the grounds division has not grown in staffing size in many years. And so we're trying to play some catch up on that front. Within the planning department, planning and development, proposing creation of a full-time community planner that would be hired mid-year. And this position would have a number of different responsibilities, including basically serving as the town's assistant planner, so the next most senior person behind the director, but with a primary focus on affordable housing. The town has, town council in particular, has a number of very important affordable housing goals, We have an affordable housing plan that came online a few years ago, and we have several $1 million that's been set aside in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to help promote the construction and creation of new affordable housing in town to meet our affordable housing goals. And staff bandwidth and planning and development is a challenge. It's a small shop to begin with, and so we really need a dedicated person to help run point on affordable housing initiatives. And then human services. This includes a budget for a full-time prevention worker to be hired September 1st, so 3 months or a couple months, 2 months into the fiscal year, and one part-time food service assistant that would be a mid-year acquisition. A couple notes on that front. We made some changes, organizational changes in terms of social workers this past year, 2 social workers that were with human services. Basically, the budget for those positions moved out of the town budget and was absorbed by the Board of Education to create social worker positions in Mansfield Public Schools. And so this position, there's still tremendous savings from those transitioned social worker positions, but there is a need to create this prevention worker position. It doesn't even completely eliminate the savings from one social worker position, because the salary for this position would be less, but it's important to know where there's some of the offset coming from. And then the food service assistant, the senior center offers a tremendous nutrition program, tremendous meal program, and the needs of the senior center and the meals that they're providing our seniors continues to grow, and so we need more help in the kitchen. And then the library, which obviously does fantastic work and is growing the programs and services it's providing under new leadership, is looking to add a part-time library assistant, which in the proposed budget would start July 1, so it would be funded for the full fiscal year. So those are all the positions, proposed service improvements that combine for a total of $440,000 of additional investment in the budget for FY26. So now that I just got done talking about service improvements, I just want to show for comparative purposes, if those service improvements were backed out and we were just talking about funding kind of the underlying base budget, if you will, this is what things would look like. So the town's municipal operating budget would be up by about 3.5%, and the overall general fund budget would be up by just about 3.1%. Just a couple notes on Mansfield Public Schools, Mansfield Board of Ed, and their budget. Obviously, Superintendent Dart will have an opportunity to come and address the council and provide far more detail about what's going on with the Mansfield Public Schools budget. But just a quick summary sketch. The budget, as adopted by the Board of Education, is a 3.2% increase over last year's budget, about $800,000. $395,000, just under $400,000 of that coming in terms of salary adjustments. It is important to note, though, that from a staffing standpoint, it's pretty much steady state. It's only a net increase of 1/4 full-time equivalent and certified staff. Benefits up $119,000, and that's largely being driven by a 10% increase in MERS contributions, the Municipal Employee Retirement System. And then operating expenses, things like outplacement tuition, transportation costs, and energy cost increases combine for a total of about $289,000 of increase year over year. So we talk about fund balance quite a bit. This is a term that gets thrown around. What fund balance is, one way of thinking of it's kind of like a net worth, but it's an accumulation of revenues, less accumulation of expenditures in a given governmental fund. And so while every fund the town maintains has a fund balance, when we say in common parlance, what does this do to fund balance? We're typically talking about the town's general fund. And so the town council has a policy target of 17% fund balance, which is saying that the goal is to ensure that 17% or 17% equivalent of the annual operating budget, and that's that $60+ million figure, so inclusive of the school portions of the budget, that we have that in soft reserve or in fund balance. And so as you can see here, even though we're anticipating use of surplus dollars in FY25 to fund a number of important one-time priority projects, We still believe that we're going to have a fund balance in excess of 17%, which means we're in a very healthy position. And for a frame of reference, 17% is sort of the upper end of what subject matter experts in governmental and public sector accounting recommend maintaining. So we're in a very healthy financial position, which will help us with continue to help us with our bond rating. A few notes on capital. So this year's capital budget, $8.7 million in proposed spending. Capital projects are one-time things, whether you're replacing a building or a fire truck or paving a road. These are projects with a useful life of at least 5 years, oftentimes decades. In terms of sources of funding for capital projects, the lion's share of the funding comes from the Capital Non-Recurring Fund, which is funded through a few different things in of itself. The general fund, which we just got done talking about, the operating budget. So within that operating budget, $4.6 million is being proposed to be transferred to the Capital Non-Recurring Fund. So that's the single largest contribution. Also, a little under $500,000 in ambulance user fees. The town's Pequot Mohegan grant, which is just over $179,000. Those items collectively combine to the just under $5.3 million Capital Non-Recurring Fund budget. And then there are some other sources of funding that round out our contributions to our capital projects fund capital budget this year. And that's the LoSiP and Town Aid Road grants, a contribution of $40,000 from the Management Services Fund, a capital lease for the proposed replacement ambulance in the amount of $490,000. And then we are anticipating a November 2025 bond referendum to underwrite the cost of a replacement animal control building, animal shelter, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Total revenues, $8,710,000. This is just a breakout of that $8.7 million, how much basically is attached to each department or a functional area. So as is often the case, not an exception this year, the two biggest areas of capital investment in this year's proposed capital budget are public works and facilities management. And it's important to note that facilities management is inclusive of the town and Mansfield Public Schools, because Mansfield Public Schools does not have its own capital budget. We own the school buildings, so any capital improvements to Mansfield Public Schools buildings, so Mansfield Elementary School, Mansfield Middle School, is funded in the town's capital improvement program. And that's different than Regional School District 19, which is a regional district, has its own capital budget. In terms of a few comments on other budget drivers, so the general fund transfer to the Parks and Rec fund, I am proposing an increase this year of about $57,000. That's just about 7.5%. Each year, the general fund subsidizes, by way of this transfer, the operating budget of Mansfield Parks and Recreation. And that percentage changes a little bit or varies a little bit year to year, but it's roughly 30% in this year's budget. So it's about a 70-30 split. 70% then of the Parks and Recreation budget would be funded by revenue that it generates, so membership fees, program fees, things like that. And then a 30% subsidy from the town, which it's important to note that there are an awful lot of things that Mansfield Parks and Rec provides to the public for public use and enjoyment that doesn't have any form of offsetting revenue. So if you've enjoyed passive recreation on an athletic field after hours, if you've enjoyed walking on a town or trail on a town-owned forest, these are all things that come at some cost, maintaining those assets for which there's no revenue collected. You know, there's nobody collecting fees, entrance fees when you walk on a town trail. And so those are all things that absorb an expense without offsetting revenue. And so that's the philosophy behind the general fund support for Parks and Rec. It's also important to note we finished up a very comprehensive master planning process in Parks and Recreation within the past year, and that included a robust financial sustainability strategy. Parks and Recreation has experienced some challenges, as have Parks and Rec programs and fitness centers across the country, as a result of the pandemic. People who were frequenters of fitness facilities, wellness facilities, many of them, millions and millions of people, changed their daily habits during the pandemic. And while many of those people, fortunately, have resumed the lifestyle in terms of their use of fitness facilities that they had in the pre-pandemic world, many people who invested in home gym equipment or otherwise made changes in their habits have been slow to come back or haven't come back. And so we need to make sure that we are accounting for that and we're doing what we can to bring people back, but we also have to understand that in some ways, our future membership and what we might hope to bring in terms of engagement and participation, that has been changed in a way that has staying power as a result of the pandemic. But the Mansfield, the master plan that we did for Parks and Rec has laid out a number of strategies that we're excited to be implementing with this year's budget, and looking forward to improving upon and enhancing the recreational experience that everybody receives, whether they're going to the community center or Bicentennial Pond or any number of the other assets and resources that Mansfield Parks and Recreation provides. Debt service is another area of driving some increase in the budget this year. I mentioned earlier that this year's budget represents a $100,000 increase in debt service obligation as compared to FY25. And just by way of a little more background, our overall debt service obligations did increase substantially starting a few years ago, FY23, which is when we began to pay on the debt issued both as a combination of the Mansfield Elementary School project as well as the Mansfield Middle School roof and photovoltaic project. We bonded roughly $15 million to be paid back over a 20-year period. And so this year's debt service obligation increase reflects that we're still basically playing catch up there. And the town council did authorize, when we showed a very healthy surplus in FY23, authorized the use of year-end surplus funds to kind of preload our debt service payments to smooth out that rate of increase over the coming years, which I will actually now go ahead and show in, oh, I guess we took that chart out for this presentation, I apologize. But basically our debt service obligation this year, which is $1.9 million, would have been $2.35 million, about $450,000 above what's included in my proposed budget had the council not used surplus funds from a couple years ago. And so you can think of that as mill rate stabilization, because otherwise our tax rate would have to go up commensurately to pay in that additional debt service. So it was a very shrewd move by the Mansfield Town Council a couple of years ago to do that. A few other notes on projected future debt service. So these are not things reflected in the numbers I just spoke on. These would be subject to future bond referendum, so it's borrowing that has not yet happened. We do know that we need to replace our existing animal control facility, our animal shelter. This is a very small, cramped, aging facility. I believe it's 70 or 80 years old. It's a little more than 600 square feet. And there's not an opportunity, it's not a candidate for renovation. It needs to be replaced. And so we've been working with a design firm to figure out, based on the size of our community, based on the demands of our existing animal control department, and anticipating, in the sort of midterm future, what the additional needs might be, that we're looking at about a 3,000 square foot facility, and with a construction cost of about $1.5 million, but the total cost, inclusive of site work and other costs needed to make the project happen, we're looking at closer to $2.5 million. And that's certainly more than we can take on in terms of a pay-as-you-go capital project. The dollar amount would require borrowing, so we're looking at a bond referendum in November to do that. And it's important to note that there are a number of regulatory changes that the state has passed that will be coming into effect as of January 1st, 2029, that our existing shelter is impossible. It would not be possible for our existing shelter to meet. So we have standards for the facility that we have to be in compliance with. And that's another reason that we really have to invest in a new facility, and we have to do so to have it completed and operational in advance of that January 2029 date. Also, we have a large number of other municipal facilities that are aging that were designed for purposes unrelated to what they're currently being used for. So a good example is the town hall that we're sitting in here where I'm giving this presentation. This used to be a grammar school, and it feels like a grammar school in terms of the hallways and the layout of the rooms. You can very easily see how this used to be carved up as classrooms. But this, like many other buildings, again, aging, the layout kind of works against the anticipated future needs, and there would be much more efficient ways of utilizing comparable square footage. And so we're doing a municipal facilities master plan to look at all of our facility needs. We've been doing this in phases, and those phases started a few years ago. So we've been progressing in this work as the years have gone on, and we've identified some really important needs relative to our senior center and then our core municipal services campus, which includes town hall and includes the community center. And so we're looking at, we are going to be working with a architecture and design firm on the next sort of phase of conceptual design work for our municipal campus. That's being funded by a grant, but the town council does need to be mindful, although it wouldn't be part of any bond referendum for FY26, so November of 25, that it probably will be November of 26 when we need to address through bond referendum some pretty meaningful facility improvement projects that will be further designed this year. So going to end with what most people, most citizens are concerned with, and that is, okay, now that you've said what you're looking to do with this year's budget and some of the areas of service improvement and the like, what is going to be the impact on me as a taxpayer? And so, not to, I guess, keep sounding like a broken record, but we did come through a reval, or we're finishing up a reval. So there was a pretty dramatic change in people's assessments, most people's assessments during the reval. And so, as you can see in this table, before the reval, so when we set the tax rate last year, basically a year ago, almost to the day, the median home value, the median assessed value, which is 70% of market value, was about $156,000. And so the fair market value that was based on last year was about $222,000. We knew, because revals are done every 5 years, and a lot changes in the real estate market during a 5-year period, and throw in a pandemic, there was a lot going on in terms of changes in the real estate market during the last 5 years. Not that anything was sort of specific to Mansfield. Towns across the country were seeing the real estate values change dramatically. But in Mansfield, the increase in value went from $222,000, the median home value, to basically $360,000. And so that yields a assessed value, median home value assessed value following the reval of about $252,000. And so, because obviously our budget is not going up anywhere near as large a percentage as the underlying value, we can reduce the mill rate substantially. And so we're anticipating a 34% reduction in the mill rate, which would drop the mill rate from this year's mill rate of 30.52 per 1,000 in assessed value to 20.1. And as you can see in the last column of the table on the left, the column labeled taxes. So to try to do as best we can an apples to apples comparison, the median home, or homeowner with a median valued home last year would have paid $4,752 based on last year's mill rate. And the hypothetical property owner with a median value home following the reval would be looking at a $5,062 tax bill, about $310 for the year, or $26 a month. Taxes aren't paid monthly, but if you kind of amortize it out to get a sense of what somebody's monthly budget impact would be, it's $26. So for that hypothetical landowner that owns a property appraised at the median value, and pays $5,062 for the year in property taxes. Where does that money go in terms of funding our municipal government? This is a breakdown of that. So again, a little over 55% goes to education, 12.5% to general government, 11.4% other financing uses, including our capital program, just under 10% public safety, 7.2% public works, and 3.6% for health and welfare, culture, and recreation. So a quick recap. My proposed budget proposes enhancing services in a number of areas, and that's being done by way of proposing additional staffing in the departments of Mansfield Fire and Emergency Services, Planning and Development, Public Works, Mansfield Public Library, Human Services, and then the conversion of a part-time position into a full-time position in the Building and Housing Department. All right, so that ends the public information session, the planned remarks. Happy to field any questions any members of the public have. I do see that we have a member of the public here in the room. It doesn't look like we have anybody from the public online at the moment. So not to put you on the spot, sir, if you have any questions, happy to field them. If you have any questions, I would just ask that you sit at the table. There's a microphone that you can activate by pushing the push button. Otherwise, this would be the end of the meeting. Okay. Our guest is declining to ask any questions. I want to thank everybody for listening. This presentation, which is being recorded, just like all our recorded meetings, will be posted on the town's YouTube channel. And look forward to next Monday's meeting with the town council as we start to delve into the budget in more detail. Thank you all.